Blueprints does a bunch of things incredibly well. Let's break the design of them down. Now there are three core pillars to blueprints, which are resource management, decision making, and exploration. Let's go over each of them and I'll explain what Blueprints does exceptionally well to bolster each of them. Number 1, resource management. Now resources themselves in the game can be broken down into 3 types: door openers, resource collectors, and stamina regainers. For the door openers we have gems, keycards, and keys. Gems allow the player to purchase what would be considered better rooms in the drafting phase. This is important as almost every room that requires a gem gives the player more than one exit for the next room, meaning they can progress the run. If you have no gems, then you run the risk of your run finishing early. This gives gems an importance to them, as they act as a way to increase the range of choice the players have, but also as a last-ditch lifeline for the players too. Keycards give the player access to specific rooms. They are quite rare to find and can be bypassed if the player has been to a security room and changed the keycard settings. And then finally we have keys. Keys are interesting as they can be used for 2 things. Of course they can be used for doors, and similar to gems, they have a great importance to the player due to the fact that if the player is met with a locked door, it could end their run, so they need a key in order to progress. As the player progresses up the levels of the manor, doors are more likely to be locked, so it's in the player's best interest to save keys for the later stages of their run. However, they can also be used for trunks as well. Trunks provide the player with random additional resources, which can include keys. These resources can often be very important to a run, but it also begs the question: will the player use the key to potentially get resources they need, or will they save it for a locked door? We will come back to all 3 of these door openers later, as they tie deeply into the decision making pillar, but for now let's move on to the resource collectors. For resource collectors we have tools such as the sledgehammer, metal detector, and shovel. The sledgehammer allows the player to make that decision between using a key for a door or a trunk easier, as if they have the sledgehammer, you can open trunks without the need for a key. The sledgehammer can turn into an incredible tool to gain a lot of resources from your run without relying on key drops, so when the player finds one, it's a big boost. The metal detector is a great tool for telling the player if they are near a resource. As rooms get more and more complicated, it can be difficult to find the tiny coins or hidden gems around the place. Whenever you are near one of these resources, the metal detector appears at the top right of the screen and blinks more or less depending on how close you are to them. And the other example is the shovel, which allows the players to dig up dirt piles that spawn randomly in rooms, giving them more resources than they otherwise could obtain. The shovel is distinctly different from the sledgehammer, as there is no decision making here. You simply just get more resources, as you can't access the dirt piles in any other way. Finally, we have the stamina regainers, which are the food and the rooms themselves. Food allows the player to gain additional steps. Steps are used up one at a time for every room you go into, including rooms you have already been in. If you use up all of your steps, then the day ends and you have to restart on the next run. Steps are one of the 2 crucial resources to keep track of, so when the player has the opportunity to gain more food, either by finding it or spending money to get it, then they will make the decisions necessary in order to do it. The more tricky decision is whether or not the player uses rooms to gain steps. Rooms that gain player steps almost always have the trade-off of not providing another exit to the room, meaning that it creates a dead end. This creates a very interesting and almost binary decision for the player. Do I gain a lot more steps at the cost of blocking off a path? Now this leads us on to 2 final resources which are more high level but underpin the whole game. The 2 resources are steps and exits. As just explained, steps equal stamina. A lot of decision making about the players pathing through rooms and what rooms they choose, especially as their steps get lower as they progress through the run, often involves steps. The next resource, exits, leads us on to our next pillar. Number 2. Decision making. Now the room drafting is the USP of this whole title, but fundamentally it's not really unique. Any roguelike where the player can see the map does the exact same thing. Hades gives you the choice between multiple rooms, telling the player what resource type they are likely to get by entering it. The Binding of Isaac has multiple doors to go through in each room, and the player is committed to it when they enter it. They can gain knowledge about that room type ahead of time with specific items. However, it's how Blueprints has built the entire game around the room drafting mechanic which makes it special and unique. Let's break it down further. When choosing which of the 3 rooms to pick, there are often a lot of things to consider, such as number of exits, placement of exits, what resources you gain and lose, additional benefits that the rooms provide, what the room type is, and whether or not it is a new room. Let's start at the top, as that is what led on from the last section. In fact, let's group number 1 and 2 together. Let's discuss why the number of exits and the placement of exits in the room you are drafting is important. From the start, the player is told 2 things. The player needs to find the 46th room in the 45 room estates, and that the antechamber, the furthest room away from the starting location, could lead to information about this 46th room. This puts a lot of importance on the players choosing rooms that firstly have additional exits, but also have exits which progress up the levels of the manor towards the antechamber. So that's the first key decision players make during this loop. What room to have based on the number and placement of exits. Rooms can have up to 4 exits, now 3 not including the one that the player came through. Depending on the placement of these exits and which direction you are coming from, you can be getting exits pointing in any cardinal direction. Rooms with lots of exits could be leading into rooms you've already been into, essentially creating a dead end. Rooms with just 2 exits could point directly to the antechamber, and it might be better to go with a room with just 1 exit because you're creating a dead end anyway. The amount of choice alongside the already pre-established floor plan before going into the drafting phase creates a massive amount of variety alongside a decision making process which is different almost every time. Moving on to the next point, what resources you gain and lose when you enter a room. The amount of exits is usually the key balancing tool used when considering how many resources to put into a room. A room with a key, gem and a coin will most likely only have 1 exit. A room with just coins might have 2 exits, and a room with 4 exits might have no resources at all. The decision here is more simplified. It's simply, can the player afford to reduce their options via exits in order to gain resources which could later improve their options? Remember before when we were talking about resources? A run can end if the player does not have enough keys or gems, so maybe picking a room that has less exits early to get gems and keys can actually increase the amount of exits the player can use later in the run if they come across a door that requires a key or a room that requires gems. The next point is around additional room benefits. Just as some examples. Number 1, the security room can give the player access to keycard settings. Number 2, the breaker room can give the player access to power controls of certain rooms. Number 3, mail rooms allow you to order items for the next day. Next we have the room type. Depending on any passives you might have active or any build you are going for, the room type, i.e. the colour of the room, could play a big impact in the decision making process. The player could be hoping for a kitchen which has a food item which gives you 5 extra steps for every bedroom you have in your floor plan, or you might have a green room which places gems in other green rooms. This isn't a huge part of each draft, but when an opportunity comes along to make other room types yield more value, it is something the player always has to consider. Finally, we have the point which leads onto our final pillar, whether or not this room is new. What I mean by new is whether or not the player has ever come across this specific room before, and this can mean in this run or any previous runs as well. The reason why this is important is because every new room, there is a good chance there will be new information in it. This could be a note, a code, a hint, or just lore. This, much like the rooms which provide additional benefits, can shoehorn itself into the decision making process. This is because of how strong the third pillar of this game is, exploration. Number 3, exploration. With every new room the player drafts and chooses, there is most likely new information to be gained. This goes back to the top with the initial premise. Find the 46th room in the 45th room manor. This right there builds intrigue and creates the player's goal. The fact that the sentence is illogical creates a need to find out more. The player needs to uncover more information for that statement to even make sense. It primes the player to do what the game wants it to do, to look and think. Each room is designed in a way that the more you look, the more you see. This can mean the first time you're in a room or the 10th time that you're in a room. One other aspect of this game which needs discussing, which elevates exploration, is the way that the run bookends itself. Nowadays, a design such as blueprints, where the game very purposefully creates a bubble in the guise of a run, which allows the player to be comfortable with turning off the game once they finish it, which is often avoided as it does just that. It makes the player comfortable with turning the game off. However, with that being said, each run will more often than not grant the player with new information. This lends itself to the experience of something being left with the player every time they turn the game off. They think about the game when they aren't playing it, which builds excitement and intrigue for the next time they can carve out time to explore the manor once more. These 3 pillars, resource management, decision making, and exploration, work together so well it's insane. Gathering enough resources to be able to unlock doors and increase stamina bleeds so heavily into the decision making process of which room to pick, whilst deciding which room to pick is based off whether or not the exits are pointing towards the antechamber, or whether or not it's a new room entirely, which could increase the amount of information you have, which in turn increases the quality of the feeling of exploration. Every resource, tool, room, note have all been carefully designed to make every decision meaningful, and that is just what good game design is all about. With any GDL video, I like to give you a very specific example to reference, but also end off the video with a more vague lesson, or just an understanding of what we've just talked about. With this one, I will say this: with your own game, make sure that your pillars work together to firstly make the minute-to-minute gameplay as interesting as possible, but secondly, improve the quality of the intended player experience. Having pillars work separately can be a recipe for a good quality experience, but as you can see with blueprints, having them work together to equal more than some of their parts can truly yield amazing results. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe, and tune into GDL next week for another entry into the game design library, and keep on keeping on.